We all face the painful regret of making poor decisions that cost us time, money, and peace of mind. To solve this, we typically try to gather more information or trust our gut feelings even more, unaware that we are blindly following flawed assumptions. In Thinking Fast and Slow, Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman reveals that our minds are secretly controlled by two competing forces: a fast, impulsive, and automatic System 1, and a slow, deliberate, but lazy System 2. By listening to this book, you will uncover the hidden cognitive biases that dictate your choices without your conscious awareness. Listen to discover how to outsmart your own mind, avoid costly mental traps, and radically transform the way you make decisions forever. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're not just skimming the surface, we're really jumping straight into the deep end with what is arguably probably one of the most significant nonfiction books of the last 50 years. We are unpacking Daniel Kahneman's masterpiece.
Yeah, it really is. It's the heavy hitter of behavioral psychology. I mean, it is not an exaggeration to say that Kahneman and his late research partner, Amos Tversky, didn't just write a book. They fundamentally changed the operating system of how we understand human judgment.
Right.
They bridged that gap between psychology and economics and effectively proved that humans are just not the rational, logical, utility-maximizing robots that economists had assumed we were for decades.
Which is basically, a polite academic way of saying they proved we're all a bit delusional about how smart we actually are.
Ideally, yes. But it's not just about being smart or dumb in terms of IQ. It's about the machinery of the mind itself. Even the absolute smartest people fall into these exact same traps.
And that is our mission today for you listening. We are going to pull out the 10 critical lessons from this work. We want to really understand the specific mechanics of why we make irrational choices, whether you're deciding on a mortgage, choosing a partner, or honestly just deciding what to eat for lunch. And I think the best place to start is with the cast of characters. The book is set up almost like a psychological drama between two agents inside your brain.
Right, which brings us to lesson 1, the two systems of thinking. Now, Kahneman is very careful to give a disclaimer here. These aren't literal little people sitting in your head.
Yeah, no little homunculi pulling levers.
Exactly. And they aren't specific physical regions of the brain like the frontal lobe or the amygdala either. They are just incredibly useful metaphors for two distinct modes of thinking.
Okay, so let's meet the cast. Who is the first character?
That would be System 1. You can think of System 1 as the speed demon. It operates automatically, quickly, with little or no effort, and honestly no sense of voluntary control. It's the part of you that sees a face and instantly knows, oh, that person is angry. You don't have to analyze their eyebrows or the curve of their mouth. The information just arrives.
It's the autopilot, like when I drive to work and suddenly realize I don't remember the actual drive or any of the specific turns I made.
That is pure System 1 right there. It handles the familiar. If I ask you what 2 plus 2 is, the number 4 just pops right into your mind. You didn't do the math.
It's just associative memory.
Exactly. It just happened to you.
Okay, so if System 1 is this fast, automatic one, then System 2 is the heavy lifter.
Precisely. System 2 is the slow thinker. It allocates attention to the really effortful mental activities that demand it, including complex computations. So if I asked you to multiply 17 by 24...
I can literally feel my brain screeching to a halt just hearing you say those numbers.
Right. Your autopilot just crashes. You have to stop, focus, hold the numbers in your working memory, and physically grind through the steps. That feeling of mental strain, that actual pupil dilation, that is System 2. It's deliberate, it's logical, and it's extremely expensive in terms of energy.
But here's where the narrative gets super interesting to me. We tend to identify with System 2, don't we? Like, I think of me, my identity, as the conscious, logical, reasoning self that makes the choices.
And that is the huge plot twist of the book. We think we're the protagonist, the System 2. We think we are the CEO of our own minds. But Kahneman argues that System 1 is actually the hero of the book. It is running the show 95% of the time.
Wow.
System 2 is just really lazy. It believes it's in charge, but usually it just rubber stamps whatever suggestions or impulses System 1 throws at it. It acts way more like a press secretary justifying your gut feelings than, a critical editor checking the facts.
That is a very humbling realization. We're essentially walking around with a lazy controller who is asleep at the wheel while our impulsive autopilot drives the car.
And the autopilot can't be turned off. That's the real kicker. Think about the Mueller-Lyer illusion, the one with the 2 lines with little fins on the end.
Oh, I know the one. One line has fins pointing out, making it look shorter. The other has fins pointing in, making it look way longer.
Exactly. And even after you measure them with a ruler and your System 2 knows for an absolute fact they are the exact same length, you still see them as different lengths. System 1 perceives the difference, and System 2 cannot override that perception. It can only override your reaction to it. You literally have to learn to mistrust your own eyes.
Which brings us perfectly to lesson 2, the fallibility of intuition. Because we live in a culture that completely worships trusting your gut. Business leaders talk about it, artists talk about it. But Kahneman seems to suggest that gut feeling is often just a very polite term for jumping to conclusions.
Well, it depends entirely on the context. You see, intuition isn't magic. It's just recognition. It works beautifully in what he calls regular environments, where you get immediate, consistent feedback. So a firefighter who senses a floor is about to collapse isn't psychic. They are recognizing subtle cues, heat, sound based on thousands of hours of experience where fire behaves according to the laws of physics.
Right, because fire is predictable. If you touch it, it burns every single time.
Precisely. But the stock market, or global politics, those are irregular environments. They are chaotic and low validity. In those situations, intuition is often a complete illusion. You might feel a strong gut instinct that a stock is going to go up, but that feeling is likely just noise, not real insight.
There's that famous anecdote in the source material about the chief investment officer who bet heavily on Ford stock.
Oh, I love this one. It's so relatable. He buys millions in stock. And when they asked him why, he didn't talk about PE ratios or supply chains. He just said, I was at a car show and the cars just looked great. I felt they knew how to build a car.
He trusted his gut. He just liked the shiny cars.
And he was wrong. But more importantly, he was using a cognitive shortcut. He was answering the wrong question entirely, which actually leads us right into Lesson 9, the substitution of questions.
I found this to be one of the most practical takeaways in the entire deep dive. Unpack the substitution thing for us.
So remember how System 2 is lazy. It doesn't want to do hard work. So when System 1 is faced with a really difficult, complex question, like, is Ford stock underpriced relative to the market? It's just too hard. So the brain quietly swaps it out for an easier related question. Do I like Ford cars?
And we don't even notice the switch happened.
No, we don't. Kahneman calls this the mental shotgun. Your brain computes way more information than is needed, and that extra noise clutters your judgment. We answer the easy question, and we confidently assume we've solved the hard one.
There was a study with German students that perfectly illustrated this mechanism. They asked them 2 questions. How happy are you these days? And how many dates did you have last month?
Right. And when asked in that specific order, happiness first, then dates, there was almost zero correlation. The students were able to assess their overall well-being completely independent of their romantic success. Their System 2 answered the broader happiness question genuinely.
But if you flip the order,
If you ask about dates first, suddenly the correlation spikes massively. The students who hadn't dated felt miserable about their whole lives. The students who had dated felt their whole lives were absolutely great.
just because System 1 substituted the really complex question, how happy am I with my existence, with the much easier question, how happy am I with my love life?
Exactly. The dating question primed them. It made that emotional information highly accessible, so System 1 just grabbed it and used it to answer the bigger question. It's very efficient, but it leads to massive errors in judgment.
Speaking of accessible information, that leads us directly into Lesson 6, the availability heuristic. This explains so much about how we view the world and especially the news.
It really does. The basic rule of thumb here is if it's easy to recall, we think it's common. We judge the probability of an event by the ease with which examples come to mind.
The classic example involves the letter K. If you ask people, does the letter K appear more often as the first letter of a word or the third letter, what happens?
The vast majority will say it's the first letter. Why? Because it is so much easier to search your memory for words that start with K, kitchen, kite, king.
Right.
Rather than trying to search for words where K is third, like ask or acknowledge, it's basically a search engine optimization error happening in your brain.
But in reality,
K appears in the third position twice as often. But because our memory search is biased toward the start of words, our judgment of reality gets skewed. We confuse ease of retrieval with actual truth.
And this goes way beyond just playing Scrabble. This explains why we are terrified of the entirely wrong things in life.
It creates what are called availability cascades, which are usually driven by the media. Think about a shark attack or a plane crash. It's vivid, it's bloody, it's dramatic. It leads the evening news. Because those images are so highly available in our minds, we vastly overestimate our personal risk of dying that way. Meanwhile, we completely ignore boring, silent killers like asthma or diabetes because they just don't make the evening news.
So if it bleeds, it leads, and if it leads, we think it's everywhere. Our internal risk calculator is broken because it's running on drama, not actual data. And it seems like we are also incredibly easily manipulated by random numbers. Let's talk about lesson 3, the anchoring effect.
This one is genuinely disturbing because it shows how untethered our judgment really is. Anchoring is when we rely way too heavily on the first piece of information offered, the anchor, when making decisions.
Even when that information is completely objectively irrelevant, like I was looking at the Wheel of Fortune experiment. Kahneman and Tversky rigged a wheel to land on either 10 or 65. They had students spin it, look at the random number, and then answer the question, what percentage of African nations are in the UN?
It's totally absurd, right? The number on a roulette wheel has zero logical connection to African geopolitics. But the students who saw 10 guessed around 25%. The students who saw 65 guessed around 45%.
That is a massive swing just because a random number flashed in front of their eyes seconds before.
It happens because of two things. First, System 2 is lazy. It tries to adjust from the anchor, but it stops way too soon.
Yeah.
You see 10, you adjust up, but you stop at 25 because you think, yeah, I've moved enough. Second, System 1 is primed. If you see the number 65, your brain starts activating associations with high numbers or abundance, which then subconsciously leaks into your estimate.
And this isn't just undergrads in a lab being silly. They caught real estate agents doing this in the real world.
They absolutely did. They gave these professional agents a booklet of info on a house. Half the agents saw a very high listing price, half saw a low one. The agents swore the listing price didn't affect their professional appraisal. They said, I'm a pro, I look at the square footage, I look at the comps. But the data showed the listing price had a 41% anchoring effect. They were tethered to a number they claimed to be completely ignoring.
It really seems like System 1 is just a machine for jumping to conclusions. It takes whatever scrap of data it has, a random listing price, a scary news story, and builds a whole solid worldview around it.
That is the absolute core of Lesson 7. Kahneman has a fantastic acronym for this, WYSIIT.
What you see is all there is.
Exactly. It's the unofficial motto of System 1. It constructs the best possible, most coherent story it can from the information it has right now, completely ignoring any information it doesn't have. It never pauses to ask, what evidence am I missing? It just says, does this story make sense?
So for us, confidence is a feeling, not a metric of truth.
Bingo. Confidence is determined by the coherence of the story, not the quality or amount of the evidence. This perfectly explains Lesson 7's focus on overconfidence and the illusion of skill. Kahneman points out that stock picking in a highly efficient market is essentially just luck. The data proves it over and over. But because traders can tell a really coherent story, oh, tech is booming because of AI, they feel a remarkably high degree of skill.
We just love to take credit for luck, which is a perfect segue to Lesson 8, regression to the mean. This is something sports fans deal with all the time, usually without realizing it.
This is a concept that System 1 really struggles with because it requires statistical thinking. And System 1 only knows causal thinking. It desperately wants a cause and an effect for everything.
So imagine a rookie quarterback has an incredible first season. He's totally unstoppable. We all think he's a star. Then season 2 comes around, and he's just average.
Right, and the sports commentators go wild. He got lazy, the fame went to his head. It's the Madden curse. We invent a causal story to explain the drop in performance.
But the reality is much more boring.
The reality is regression to the mean. Extreme performance, whether good or bad, is usually followed by more average performance. That first amazing season was a combination of skill and a whole lot of luck. In the second season, the luck just ran out. But the human mind hates luck as an explanation. We demand a reason.
We demand a reason, and we also demand to keep what is ours. This leads directly to Lesson 4, loss aversion. This might actually be the most famous concept to come out of behavioral economics.
Losses loom larger than gains. It's a fundamental hardwired asymmetry in how we process value.
They actually put a specific number on it, right? The loss aversion ratio.
It did. It's typically between 1.5 and 2.5.
Yeah.
That means if I offer you a simple coin toss where you could lose $100, you aren't going to take that bet unless the potential gain on the other side is at least $200. The pain of losing $100 is twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining $100.
Which makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Completely. Organisms that treated threats, meaning losses, as more urgent than opportunities, survived much longer. You can miss a lunch and survive.
Yeah.
You cannot miss a predator and survive. We are basically the descendants of the highly anxious ones.
And this leads to the endowment effect, which perfectly explains why I can literally never throw anything away. They did that famous study with the coffee mugs.
Yes. They gave random participants a simple coffee mug. Then they opened a little market to let them sell the mug or let others buy it. The people who had the mug, the sellers, demanded about twice as much money as the buyers were willing to pay to get it.
Logically, the mug is worth the exact same amount. But once it's my mug, giving it up feels like a loss.
And since losses hurt twice as much, the perceived price doubles. We overvalue what we own simply because we own it.
It's so irrational, but it feels incredibly real when you're in it. And it shows how easily we can be manipulated just by how a choice is presented to us. That's lesson 5, framing matters.
Right. Logical consistency is a total myth. If you present the exact same information in two different ways or frames, people will make totally opposite choices. The medical example in the book is actually quite terrifying when you think about it.
Because these were doctors, right, highly trained experts.
Yes, actual physicians. They were given statistics on a lung cancer procedure. Group A was told the 1-month survival rate is 90%. Group B was told there is a 10% mortality rate in the first month.
Those are identical statistics. 100 minus 10 is 90.
They are mathematically identical, but the results weren't. The doctors told about the survival rate overwhelmingly chose to recommend the procedure. The doctors told about the mortality rate largely rejected it.
Just the word mortality triggered System 1's alarm bells.
Exactly. System 1 is highly emotional. Survival feels good. Mortality feels bad. System 2 is just too lazy to do the basic subtraction and realize they were being offered the exact same scenario.
We see this on a massive societal scale with organ donation. This fact blew my mind.
This is probably the most impactful real-world example of framing. In countries that are opt-in, where you have to actively check a box at the DMV to become a donor, donation rates are very, very low. In countries that are opt-out, where you are a donor automatically unless you specifically check a box to leave the program, rates are near 100%.
And it's not because the opt-out countries are somehow morally superior or more generous people.
No, it's strictly because checking a box requires effort. It requires System 2 to wake up. When we are unsure or lazy, we just accept the default frame. The person designing the form literally has more power over your decision than you do.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time today bashing our own brains. We are biased, we are lazy, we are easily anchored, and we fall for framing. Let's get to lesson 10, the virtues of thinking slowly. Is there any hope for us? How do you actually use this information?
Well, the bad news is you cannot turn off System 1. You will always see the optical illusion. You will always feel the emotional tug of the anchor. But you can use System 2 to consciously recognize situations where mistakes are highly likely.
So it's more about spotting the minefield before you walk into it.
Exactly. If you are in a high-stakes situation, maybe negotiating a salary, buying a house, making a major medical decision, you need to consciously force yourself to slow down. You need to ask yourself, am I answering the right question here? Am I being anchored by an irrelevant number? Is this really the only information available?
One specific strategy Kahneman mentions regarding risk that I liked is broad framing. I found this really helpful for dealing with that loss aversion we talked about earlier.
Yes. We tend to view problems in narrow frames. We look at each decision in total isolation, and that makes every single loss feel stingingly painful. Kahneman suggests thinking more like an experienced portfolio manager. Don't look at the single bet. Look at a bundle of 100 bets over a lifetime.
Sort of a you win some, you lose some mentality.
By adopting that broad frame, you significantly reduce the emotional weight of any single loss. It allows your System 2 to make the mathematically correct decision without the emotional baggage of System 1 preventing you from taking a smart risk.
But we have to be completely honest with people. Thinking slowly is physically hard work.
It is literal physiological work. When you actively engage System 2 to check that mental shotgun or question your intuition, your pupils actually dilate. Your heart rate measurably goes up. Your blood glucose levels drop. It is exhausting. But it is the only way to make rational choices in a highly complex world.
So the big takeaway here isn't that we should aspire to be perfectly rational robots. It's that we should be humble.
Humility is the absolute key. We need to recognize that our confidence often drastically outstrips our actual competence. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really suggests that organizations and societies as a whole need to build processes that protect us from our own cognitive biases. We can't rely on individuals to just try to be smarter. We need external systems, things like checklists, premortems, independent reviews, that mechanically force us to slow down.
That is a very powerful place to land. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought from the book that we didn't touch on deeply today, but it is incredibly worth exploring on your own. Kahneman talks about the two selves, the experiencing self, who actually lives through the pain or pleasure moment to moment, and the remembering self, who keeps the score afterward. The remembering self often tricks us because it completely ignores the duration of an experience. It doesn't care how long the pain lasted. It only cares about the peak intensity of the moment and how it ended.
It's a fascinating distinction. It completely changes how we view happiness and how we trust our own memories.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Follow up in next video.